This week on the VROOM podcast, a big crash.
We're racing on a historic track.
And the team rivalries heat up. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 12 of the VROOM podcast. I'm your host, Wills Jones, along with my co-host, Simon Martel.
Hello. Man, Wills, I'm still so happy that we have that intro. It didn't cost us anything. And I think it works out really well. It still hypes me up every time we start. And it's just like, boop, 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 you know?
It's a good intro. Every time I edit, I have it stuck in my head for like the next 2 days.
All right. So we just had a pretty good race. Silverstone. A couple of things happened this weekend that I think is exciting, right? It brings us to kind of what the future of F1 is. We've talked about it a lot in the last couple of weekends coming up to this weekend, but the introduction of sprint race, finally, it happened. We had our first one. We'll talk about that a bit later. But did you notice as well that they revealed their 2022 regulation like concept car again, or I guess the most recent model, which looked pretty good?
It did, yeah. I don't mind the way it looks. Now I did see
the livery was garbage on it.
The livery was terrible.
Yeah.
But the car itself looked good. I saw a meme of Valtteri Bottas, or not Valtteri, sorry, Kimi looking at it quite disappointed and said, "Look what they've done to my hobby." I thought that was pretty funny.
Gimme.
Yeah, the first time a car is being designed for good racing and not just all out speed, it's an exciting time for F1, I think.
I think also what's very funny is how optimistic everyone is. Like, I think we got to remind ourselves that people see the rule book and just find ways to, break the rules. So I don't know how long, I don't even know if the final cars are going to look like that, but it is exciting just because I think it's going to give us the switch up between all the teams that we've been wanting for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
And as well, I mean, there's so many things too I want to talk about, but like the introduction of a salary cap, it's huge too. Like that's definitely going to make a huge difference as well. So I think a lot of things to look forward to for next season. But before we get to next season, we got to talk about this one. And this race was pretty important for that championship.
Yeah, this race was mega important for the championship. I mean, Mercedes is a couple Red Bull DNFs away from taking the championship back. The experiment of sprint qualifying, you had George qualify 8th in the regular qualifying, and then I think he dropped down to 11th or 12th. So
yeah, 12.
And you hear Seb Vettel saying that he thinks sprint qualifying is a bit of a gimmick and pole position should be for the driver that sets the one fastest lap. So some interesting things going on there. What did you think of the sprint qualifying?
I don't know. I thought it was I like the idea behind it. I think it's interesting to just give us more racing. I think it's kind of a bit too gimmicky. Like at this point, right? F1 has survived so long. It's such a great format that trying to change it kind of feels like unnecessary. Kind of just feels like it's shoving us down our throat. The biggest part for me is that I didn't find it as exciting as qualifying. Because it's 17 laps, it kind of you get the first like the action of the first 2 laps, which are always interesting. Then you kind of get into a file. Now everyone's kind of warming up their tires, trying to figure it out. And then you got to wait for DRS to start. Then then you start feeling, okay, what are the pace of the people in front? Then you start thinking about, okay, let me like recharge your batteries. Let's go on an attack mode. And then it's the end, and like you didn't see that many cars get past. There wasn't that many action. Maybe it was just a track, or maybe that one time. But to me, it just feels like it was maybe too hyped up for the result or the show that we got.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of feel like, I enjoyed like the first 7 or 8 laps of it. I feel like, it was pretty exciting till then. You had a good Verstappen Hamilton battle at the front, and Max got a good start. And it, really, I found that exciting. I think 17 laps was almost too long, in my opinion. I think make it like a real sprint, like 50 kilometers, like have it done quickly. I know that they still want a decent race time for TV coverage and all that. So the they do 100-kilometer race, which at Silverstone came to, I think it was 17 laps.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and that takes about a half hour. So definitely cutting it down would make it a much, much shorter, um, like TV span. And I also kind of find that for as much as like the FIA is trying to cut down on their costs and, make F1 more affordable, I feel like sprint qualifying, like there's far too much to lose and not enough to gain with only minimal points being awarded to the top three. There's no real reason for the midfield to super push hard, in my opinion. And if you have a crash, that's going to take away, money that you could spend on development because you have to go and repair the car. So I
Yeah, that's
think,
a huge point. I agree with you on that one. Sorry for interrupting you, but I was
no,
just
no.
saying, like, I was just thinking, like, that's exactly right. I was right. I just brought up the fact that the salary cap is coming in, but now you have an extra activity that if you have a crash, that might not be your fault. You ruin your barge board. You get rear-ended and you got to switch out your engine. Like, okay, well, that team really like got a big penalty, and I think it's something I'll talk again a bit later when we talk about the crash that happened. But it's like it has big like consequences now for like something that's not the actual main event. So that's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah. And like I think the idea was good. Maybe if you have like some sprint races throughout the year on some kind of, that are usually like dirty air tracks where you just kind of you're in and out of there on a track that usually doesn't provide good racing. I think that might work. And then, have the proper long Grand Prix at tracks with better racing. Like I think a sprint race at Monaco would be really fun to watch, especially in next year's spec cars. I think that would be quite interesting where, passing and driving close is supposed to be easier. That'd be a far greater test of the driver's skill than I think just on a regular track where it's super wide. Now
Yeah,
we did get to see Fernando Alonso try his very, very, very best to keep everybody behind him, which was quite amusing. But
and he also during that spring qualifying, he had like amazing results. I think he passed like what like 4 or 5 cars on that first lap. It was crazy. It was really good to see. But I think that's the whole point, right? You want to see those highlights, but when it's one car out of the 20 and it's on the first lap, then it kind of takes away from it. I I feel like I'm on the opposite from you. You wanted it shorter. I wish we had it a bit longer. Like I wish we had it until like all the tires were close to bursting, right? And like you don't have like pit stop and stuff. Like, man, if we could have it so that like you have 3 tires blow out by the last lap, I feel like that'd be really interesting. That would get me captivated. Like, okay, let's see who was able to pass and still like maintain their tires and like really go for it. Oh, and they just got fucked. Like, I think that'd be really great.
yeah, and I mean, like by the end, by like lap 17, you kind of saw like there were, blisters developing on the tires and they were kind of starting to go. So the drivers started to back off more because of like the blistering and stuff happening to the tires. So I definitely agree. And I think for that to happen, it needs to be like a whole set of tires that are reserved for the sprint qualifying because there are also drivers by the race that didn't have a fresh set of tires left over.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's also like kind of the other aspect that I kind of want to bring on where it's like, I think that the tires is a huge like deal, but I think at that point, if you want to try to do spring qualifying, listen to me. Let's do this. Let's have a weekend where it's spring qualifying, but you don't have a main race. So do it so you have like 3 races, kind of like how F2 does it or whatever, where you have 3 races, but you still just have one winner at the end of the weekend. So you see 3 times like the same racers, right? Maybe same starting grid and see the different races we get. 3 races of 20 minutes or something. One on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. I feel like that could be interesting. Tally up the points at the end, and that's your podium sitters.
That would be enjoyable. I like that idea a lot. Now, do we want to move on to the
Like
race or
that,
do you
that
have
would
more
give
to
us the
add?
action we've been wanting.
Yeah, it would. especially then like there's more to gain throughout the weekend as well, like to rack up a lot of points throughout the weekend. I think that's a positive way for sprint races to go in Formula One.
And I think that it would bring more to the spectacle too, that it's always like, oh, how F1 is technical, and oh, like our car wasn't set up right. Well, okay, you fucked up the setup on the first race, then you got the second race and the third race to try to figure it out, what went wrong, what went right, and try to fix it. I think that could be really interesting. A car DNFs or gets crashed out, okay, bye bye, you're not in the next sprint qualifying. Man, by third race it's like 8 cars that are just battling it out. I think it could be fun.
Yeah, and I mean we kind of saw that with Perez getting taken out of the sprint qualifying. Like he started to drop way down the field, and Red Bull ended up retiring the car on, I think, like the last lap because he just had, I think, damage to his floor, and they didn't want to jeopardize the car any further for the race on Sunday.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think we can kind of move on to the race, but usually we talk about the qualifying, and because spring qualifying kind of took it over, it's kind of special. Like I know I watched it on Friday evening or whatever. I was looking at it, but it didn't feel as important. Like I was like, who cares? Like this doesn't mean anything, right? Like you have a full race where everything's gonna get switched up again, and it definitely like took away from qualifying because you had because you had spring qualifying. Like it took away from the normal one, and I feel like it just overall just less exciting than what it's supposed to be, like the whole reason of its existence.
Yeah, and I mean the Sky Sports broadcasters tried to make Friday qualifying exciting by saying, in the UK for the race at Silverstone and the British Grand Prix, they used to do Friday qualifying, Saturday race because the church was such a big deal that
Oh shit.
nothing happened on Sundays. So they tried to make it, it's historical, it's traditional to have qualifying on Friday. And I was like, I don't really care. I already know that it's all gonna get quite shuffled up in the sprint qualifying. So why would I watch the Friday qualifying?
Yeah, I agree. Let's kind of go over maybe how it switched between qualifying and the end of spring qualifying. So, for example, through qualifying on Friday, Lewis Hamilton finished first, followed by Verstappen and then Bottas. So you had two Mercedes in the top three. You had Verstappen. Then you had Charles Leclerc, uh, Perez in fifth, Lando Norris in sixth, Ricardo, Russell in eighth, Carlos Sainz, and Vettel in 10. Okay. Feels pretty good. And then some names that we usually see weren't there. They were lower down, like Pierre Gasly was only 12th. But if you look at the starting grid now, Max Verstappen's first. So I guess all of Lewis Hamilton's hard work in qualifying was kind of lost. But then it's still similar. Lewis and Bottas is there. Leclerc is fourth. But now you have Norris fifth, Ricardo sixth. Alonso made up a lot of spots that was kind of not deserved with the car he has. Vettel is eighth. Ocon, same thing. He's there at ninth. Sainz kind of got shafted, lost a lot of positions. Perez started last. Like, yeah, it definitely like impacted the starting grid a lot. The spring qualifying.
Yeah, and I mean it's really fun to see a really shuffled up starting grid. I just wish there was a less gimmicky way to give us a shuffled up starting grid than the sprint race, where like you kind of, just as it ended, I was like, okay, like I'm also ready to see more racing, but it was also getting to the point where it didn't really feel like a sprint race.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was like just the wrong number of laps where it didn't work out to bring the excitement that everyone was planning.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, talking about excitement, let's talk about the race Sunday morning. Or I guess, well, morning for us, afternoon for them. Pretty crazy things happened in it.
Yeah, so I mean, the first lap battle between Lewis and Max, I was ready to see that go all the way through the race, and I was super excited. I was like, this is going to be amazing because Lewis Hamilton was chasing a Formula One record to be able to tie it with, I think, Senna, Schumacher, and Niki Lauda, all to have, I think it's 8 wins at a track in consecutive years. So like that's a big deal, and he was definitely pushing hard to get that. I just think he was pushing a little bit too hard and made a reckless mistake.
Yeah. So I imagine if you haven't watched the race, what we're talking about is that Hamilton actually kind of took out Max, depending on the angles, depending on who you talk to. But there's definitely a racing incident. At least we can all agree on that. If it was an incident, I don't know. There was a collision. Max got taken out. He had a crash at what was it, like 51G? Like
Yeah, he
the
hit the wall at 51G.
that's a very, very, very strong impact. But he seems fine. Apparently now he's out of the hospital and he got checked out. So everyone's very grateful for that. Hopefully he's not shaking up too much and he feels good. But let's talk about it. What do you think? Do you think Hamilton was in the wrong here? Do you think it's racing? What do you think happened?
I think it's definitely hard racing, but I don't think it was good hard racing. Like
Okay.
I think we saw from the sprint qualifying that Max was able to jump Hamilton at the start and then hold him off the whole way around Silverstone. And I imagine that was in the back of Lewis's mind. And he was trying, if you watch the race, he was trying to get past Max at every single corner on that first lap. And it just passing on the inside at that corner is just downright reckless. Like
Yeah,
you
and
heard,
that's exactly like the first thing everybody like kind of said to is like you that corner is so quick. Like people don't pass in that corner because that's exactly it. It's reckless. It's dangerous.
not a corner you break into. It's a slight lift on the throttle and you keep going through. So I just I couldn't justify it with myself when I watched the race. I couldn't justify it afterwards. It to me is a reckless and quite frankly stupid um decision on Lewis to try and um keep it in through that corner.
I
Considering
mean,
that
is it stupid though? He won first.
I mean the and to say he won first, the red flag that was brought out from that crash saved him from a DNF because there was structural damage to his wheel.
Okay.
And had there not been a red flag, and this is from um, their chief engineer at Red Bull, the chief race engineer, he Andrew Shovlin, he said there was damage to his wheel rim that would have resulted in us having to DNF him if it had just been a yellow flag and the race continued without the red flag.
Oh, why do you tease me with such great possibilities? Oh no. Really? I didn't know that. I hadn't
Yeah.
caught that. That's crazy. Damn.
So I don't know. For me, it just seemed like Lewis was pushing too hard on lap one when it's a 52, 53 lap race. Like,
And
it's he
yeah.
had probably had plenty of time. You could have gotten him in the pit stops with an undercut, use the strategy and not just attack outright on track. I honestly thought Lewis was a smarter driver than that.
Yeah, and there's also like kind of the point where you see the pictures of who had their nose in front, and it really looks bad on Lewis. Where like Verstappen at the racing line, he was like clearly like half a car in front, and Lewis kind of just barged in and he kind of imposed himself, and I don't think Verstappen was forcing him out, right? Because he was such in front and he already had the racing line. Like we saw it in past like races how like Perez got really penalized when he did that and forced some people out of the track. Yeah, I just feel like Hamilton definitely didn't show the experience or the calm that you expect from a seven-time champion.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the footage as well, like he's half a car off the apex when they make contact. So realistically, the car on the inside is supposed to be as close to the inside of the corner as humanly possible. And Lewis was not. I don't know. It seemed like sloppy driving to me, and it's not something I would ever expect from Lewis Hamilton.
All right, so let's move on to that. From the incident happened, do you think the consequences were enough? were not enough? You think it was reasonable, unreasonable? What do you think? Like, what's the right reaction in this scenario?
Well, thinking back to the race last weekend, we had, the 5 second penalties for guys just nudging people off track. And so I kind of thought, you know, the incident that Lewis and Max had was not just double the incidents that happened the weekend before. Like that was a far greater incident. They were going at way higher speeds. It, it just, I don't think it was worth it. And I have a quote here from Bernie Ecclestone, who is the former sort of CEO of F1. He said, in the old days, we'd call that a racing incident. But the stewards needed to get involved. But the stewards needed to get involved, then they should have given Lewis more than 10-second penalty. It should have been 30. He goes on to say Lewis was behind him at the point of contact. It wasn't his corner. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. So it's just one of those, I think, and like I like what he said. Like in the old days, like that would have been a racing incident. Like back to the sort of Schumacher era. Yeah, that's just hard racing on lap one. But with the stewards getting involved, it should have been more than just 10 seconds.
Here, let me do devil's advocate because I kind of agree with you on that point. But I was reading online and I was like reading up on the rules, and I think there's something very interesting to bring up where it's like how the stewards are trained to look at it is that you have to look at everything up to the crash and nothing after matters. Like, I mean, of course, if they start fighting, yeah, but that's a different thing. But the like how big the crash is, or how scary it is, or what happens after the collision, should not affect at all their ruling, because they're ruling on what made the collision happen, and if that is something that has to be penalized.
I still feel like it should have been maybe not the 30 seconds that Ecclestone is suggesting it should have been, but 15 or 20 seconds. Like it's still, I still don't feel like it was enough of a punishment. Now, Helmut Marko is calling for a race ban from Lewis Hamilton for the move, which I think is just absurd and will never happen. But
yeah, because we want them to race, right? That's like, I'm kind of tied into two camps here, because of course I'm a Verstappen fan. I want him to do good. I don't really want Hamilton to get away with this, but at the same time, we always bring it up again and again. We want to see the racing, a little bit of rubbing is racing, like the stewards get involved too much. And right now, because it's the scenarios flip, it's against someone we don't really. I mean, I personally don't want to see win or whatever. Oh, now the consequences wasn't big enough. Like I can't be a hypocrite here. I think it was the right call. Like racing is racing. Yeah, he had to be penalized. Like he was in the wrong, but racing is racing, and at least like right, as long as you make those things, like you have the risk of damaging your own car, and that's part of the consequence as well. Like you brought up that he probably would have DNF if there wasn't a red flag. So maybe there the question would be like, should you allow him to switch his tires? Right? Maybe that would be the consequences. Okay, park fermé, but like nobody touches the car. Like you just sit and you wait until you get back on.
yeah, and it's so hard to judge what happens, especially because we're talking about it after the fact. But I know, like, when it happened, I wanted to see Hamilton sit in the pits for at least 15 seconds. That's sort of my opinion on it. I don't know. It's a really tough call, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like at this point, with the way like the Red Bull and Mercedes cars are built and stuff, any time penalty that's not like a minute doesn't affect the race as much as like other factors. Like you always kind of see it towards the end of a lap in the race, like the front runners, which are usually the two fastest cars, so the two constructors, Red Bull and Mercedes, are going to be in front, have a 30-50 second cushion, just because they're doing their own race with their superior cars. And so I don't know. I just feel like at that point, even though a time penalty, 10 or 50 seconds, I don't know how much of a difference it actually makes.
That's fair. Now I have another question to pose to you. If Leclerc's engine wasn't cutting out, do you think he would have won the race?
Yeah, yeah, especially if when you see when he got lapped, right? It was like 2-3 laps left, not even like
Yeah, he got passed with I
that's
think 3 laps left.
that's where the time difference like really matters. And like maybe I kind of shot myself in the foot saying it didn't matter, but probably if Hamilton had 15 seconds instead of 5 seconds, he wouldn't have passed Leclerc how he did in this race. But um, I I don't know the what ifs. Like you kind of saw that like at least I was hearing like the engineer telling Leclerc like, oh, you have to wait until like like your engine's ready, like with the lights to upshift or downshift. Like apparently Leclerc was doing it too close, and I think that's probably another reason like he had problems. He was maybe trying to do it too quick, and he
Short
was like,
shift a little
damaging the
bit. Yeah.
transmission as well. And so there's all those factors as well. But yeah, probably wouldn't happen just because the way the races was like. Then at that point, maybe Hamilton would have been held up behind Bottas or just any other back burner. And yeah, who knows?
I definitely like it. It did make for an exciting race the way everything went down with, Leclerc. He had a whole pit stop advantage over Lewis and then, or over the Mercedes with Valtteri and Lewis. He pitted, got fresh tires on, went back out. And then that's sort of when I think the issues started for him. So he went on to, I think it was a set of hard tires, I want to say, where we've talked about it. Those hard tires have less grip and less acceleration power. So when you want a car to sort of accelerate quicker on slippery surfaces, like those tires would sort of simulate for the driver, you short shift a bit so that you're not revving it all the way out and going to high RPMs where to the point where the tires might let go. So it, and that definitely sort of came down to he was continuing to push so that he would stay in front of Lewis.
Yeah. And I feel like you saw it also from a lot of like other teams, like Norris was pretty competitive at 1.2 with Bottas, and then it didn't end up like, being able to make that extra move to be able to get on the podium. I'm still very surprised every time Ferrari has like a good weekend like we saw like today. I guess maybe I should start getting my expectation higher up or different for Ferrari. But it's been what I think for the last 3 races, like they've actually like been scoring a lot of points, been performing like maybe not during quali, but during the race, like they figured out something in their car and they're looking very solid.
Yeah, and that third place battle for the Constructors' Championship has really sparked up with this race with the good finishes from Ferrari, and then I know the McLarens were close. I think they stayed sort of 5 and 6, 4 and 5 ish in there. So
yeah,
and then
yeah,
you had sorry,
so we're talking about the Constructors.
Sainz,
so
yeah. Well, then you also had Sainz coming in. I think he finished around
Sainz finished
7th.
6th. So Sainz finished 6th, while Lando and Daniel finished 4 and 5. So it is very tight, and then Leclerc second. I imagine like the points kind of round out to be similar. So it's very interesting to see. It's very good to see because it makes for great racing. And I love that you brought that up because I kind of want to bring that up. How close the constructor standings are right now. So you look at it, Red Bull and Mercedes fighting for that first place. Red Bull just had a horrible weekend. We can all agree, right?
Yeah.
Max DNF, and then Sergio Perez didn't even finish sprint qualifying. I'll come back to him a bit later because he had an interesting race, but he didn't score any points at the end of the day either. So a full-on like 0 points weekend. Actually, that's not true.
Yuki Tsunoda,
Verstappen got like 3 points from sprint qualifying, but 3 points, right? Mercedes, great weekend on their end. They scored points 2 and 3 for sprint qualifying with Hamilton and Bottas, and then the racing, they're both on the podium. That was a statement weekend for Mercedes. They're now, the difference between the two teams, their ranking is 4 points. That is minuscule. 4 points. I'm very excited. I'm a bit more stressed. I gotta admit. I hope Verstappen does not have another DNF, or maybe somebody on Red Bull's payroll kind of torpedoes into Lewis. But 4 points between that first and second place. Now, that place first, that fight for third, initially at the start of the season, I thought McLaren was running away with it, right?
Yeah, I think we all sort of expected McLaren to really solidly be a third place team this season.
They're 15 points apart.
That is close.
That is crazy because McLaren has not had like a bad weekend in a while, right? Norris has been scoring points every single week. Ricardo's improving every week.
I think Ricardo's kind of found his form after, seeing he qualified well in regular quali, and then his sprint qualifying was pretty good as well. I think he's finally figured that car out. We've been waiting for it for so long. I don't want to jinx him. Yeah, knock on wood, but
it's just on time, right? Too, because Ferrari's putting up the pressure as well. So that's pretty crazy. And then finally you have that fight for fifth place that is between the three constructors. And I'm surprised that like Alpine's still in this, but AlphaTauri with 49 points, Aston Martin with 48, and then Alpine with 40. That's a couple DNFs, a couple race, and like that switches up all around still again. So I like it. I think it's very interesting to see like three full fights. And yeah, it's good for the sport, I guess, that it's closer. I kind of wish it was different teams at different places, right? We're all fans of our own teams. But yeah, it's very interesting to see.
Very interesting. And I mean,
man, when's the last time you didn't expect like Mercedes to win by half of the season? Like that's kind of something we have to celebrate.
It really is. This has been an amazing season so far. And I just want to touch on one more point for the drivers who scored points this weekend. Yuki Tsunoda was the only Red Bull driver to score points this weekend.
That's crazy.
So good on Yuki.
Good on Yuki. Yeah, that's true. Gasly didn't have anything spectacular this weekend. He finished 11th, just out of the points. But yeah, Tsunoda, man, AlphaTauri yet again. Okay, well, yeah, we always say it, but impressive performance there. Okay, let me talk about Sergio Perez. Were you able to kind of keep an eye on him throughout the race?
He is such an amazing team player.
Yeah. And that's kind of where it leads me. He had a very strange team order. Maybe you can tell me if you understand it more than me, but he started bottom of the grid, right? He started dead last, making up spots through the pit stops and stuff. He was fighting for 8th, 9th place. And then like he was 7th. I think at one point he was 7th place. So if you end the race there, it's 3 points, right? 5 points, 3 points. And then they brought him back in to get a tire change. So he got passed by everyone, came back out. He came out 17th, did the fastest lap. Oh, okay. I was like, okay, well, at least I guess that they're getting a point instead of 3 if he had just stayed where he was. So already I was confused. And then you realize, no, like you only get a point if you're in the top 10. So not only did they lose like the possibility of 3 points, which would have been really good in this fight right now, but they didn't even get that point from the fastest lap. But the one thing they did is take it away from Mercedes. So I don't know if the math works out. Maybe you can tell me if I missed an important detail, but to me, it seems like it's pretty important. It's pretty evident. You just kind of keep going for 10 more laps. You finish 8th, you finish 7th. It's good for his morale, right? He made up like 13 spots and you score 3 points. It's better than scoring 0 points or, taking negative points from Mercedes. Yeah, I don't know. I was pretty like confused by it. and I can see, and post interview and stuff, you could see that Checo was very confused by it as well. He wasn't happy about it, but like you said, he was a great team player and just kind of accepted it. But it was a strange call.
Yeah, and I think it probably would have been a different call. I know he got um hung up behind Kimi Räikkönen in, I think Checo was in 13th, Räikkönen was in 12th. He got hung up behind him for I think 4 or 5 laps, which I think if he was able to get past him and keep keep progressing up through the field like we know Checo can do, he is an incredible racing driver. Um, then I don't think they would have gone for that because I think he probably would have been challenging for fourth or fifth, which is still a pretty good points haul. I think for Red Bull, they would rather take away the 1 point than get, a measly 3 or 5 points.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
I
that's
agree.
more what it comes down to, which definitely like doesn't make sense as a driver. And I think it's more just sort of as like a backhanded fuck you from Red Bull to Mercedes. Like we can still get the fastest lap, you assholes. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree that was pretty funny when I realized like, okay, they can't get the point, but they can take it away from Mercedes. Okay, well played. But yeah, it just seems to me like at that point, might as well just like, basic math, 3 points or, like taking away 1 point. But yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. It definitely some strange stuff happened this weekend. It was an exciting, wacky race, but uh, I mean it's sort of what we want from F1, hard racing, and I
Yeah.
guess we have to deal with the consequences when they come around.
Yeah. And I think talking about hard races, I'm not done with the race itself because I think like, we're getting spoiled with the midfield battles. Like it's really interesting to see the different teams fighting because it makes a difference, and you like you follow along, and there's good racing around that 5 to 10 spot, or maybe like 6 to 10, and you really saw that this race. Alonso kind of just like hold up like 5 people behind him. It was crazy to see. Like Stroll was 8th and was trying to pass him for half the race. It felt like, and
Yeah.
he never managed to do it. And then nobody managed to pass Stroll, and then nobody managed to pass behind him. And it was crazy. Like they were really trying and like dipping into the corners and everything. So yeah, that was interesting to see as well. And good for Alonso to just show the experience he has where he can just be like, nah, you're not passing.
I know. And I mean, it also like could have been a great race for Seb Vettel, but he had a spin out on the early laps and just kind of I think his race strategy was kind of kaput from there. But he's still and to talk about the off track stuff for Formula One, he came into the race weekend wearing a keep the Grand Prix clean shirt, and he
Yeah, do
stayed
not
after
let her.
he
Yeah,
stayed after the race and helped clean up all the garbage. So
we
that's
don't deserve
it's
Vettel.
we really don't. He's such an amazing such an amazing person. But
Man,
yeah,
yeah,
and I think having that like those amazing midfield battles is super important for F1.
yeah, yeah, definitely agree with that.
For as much as I want V10s to come back, I also want to keep the midfield alive.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. Um, so I think we have a break next week, right? And then we have a race in 2 weekends.
Yeah, we do. And now just before we move on to talking about the Hungarian Grand Prix, I want to um just touch on at Silverstone post race and on social media
Oh yeah,
there were
yeah,
racist comments made to Lewis Hamilton, and I thought it was amazing to see um the way the drivers rallied around him. Lando Norris and um Daniel Ricciardo both had messages on their social media of support, and Mick Schumacher as well posted a picture of him kneeling at the sort of Black Lives Matter ceremony they do before the race, and with the caption "We're all in this together." So I think you know having I touched on Seb Vettel, staying to clean up the track afterwards. And then also, drivers sort of practicing what they preach with the equality, and, racism has no place in racing in Formula One.
Yeah, it looked bad on the English fans, right? After the soccer fiasco as well. Oh, sorry,
Yeah, exact
football.
football.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely no place there. Um, so we can only hope people grow, right? And kind of, I mean, people are assholes. I meant if you don't have, if you don't have fucking any respect, but
If you
um,
don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at
yeah,
all.
it's crazy because you probably like the real English fans were just like, get in there, Lewis, yes. But the other people
It's
that were Verstappen fan were, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the blokes that show up to Silverstone just to watch the race and have a drunken weekend. They don't really do anything good for the sport. And I kind of think sort of the same with the soccer hooligans. I don't think they really care about what's fully going on in the field. They just want to be there and get drunk and have fun, which you
Yeah.
can still do without being a disrespectful asshole. So now now we can move on to the Hungarian GP on August 1st is when the race will be. Both quali and the race will be on at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Now, Hungaroring is dirty air central. That track is all fast corners. Even their hairpins aren't hairpins. They're just really wide U-turns where there's still dirty air.
Yeah,
So
I agree. And I think it's kind of good to go. Well, I mean, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but I'm excited to go there. We kind of like quickly talked about it, but compared to like this weekend was kind of important. Silverstone's always like something you hear a lot about because there's so many there's so many teams that have their factory right around, like Aston Martin's like factories on that racetrack, like their buildings there, and then all in a couple kilometers around is the Mercedes. You have Red Bull has a factory there. Um, I think Haas, right? Haas has a factory there.
yeah, and McLaren does as well. It's in
Yes,
what
that's true.
used to
McLaren
be
has their HQ. Yeah,
it used to be in what's called Bomber County for World War II, which it is still called Bomber County, but
yeah, with the
it's
old
it's also
airport and
it's sort of turned into F1 County, nowadays, from just
yeah,
all the facilities that are there and all the ability. Silverstone is also the track that started the Formula One World Championship. We wouldn't have the Formula One World Championship without Silverstone. It was the first track that was raced on in terms of an actual Grand Prix to hold a championship, and not just rich guys to show up in their fast cars and race for a weekend. So
yeah.
it is a historical track. And then we move on to Hungaroring, which has also been around for a very long time. And it's another classic racetrack with close walls. And
I agree, and it's pretty crazy too because of how like historic it is. There's been like a lot of talk of it like not being raced on throughout the 2000s. There was like contract talks about the cost related to it, but every time it feels like people are gonna leave it alone, right? Leave it behind and go race somewhere else in England. Well, they find a way to sign a deal that makes everyone, okay, and they go back to Silverstone. And I mean, that's another really interesting part too, is that like Sir Lewis Hamilton now has a straight name after him. Like that's
yeah.
very significant, and that really highlights the achievement of that man. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's a great race, and excited to see Hungaroring, right, where nobody has a specific allegiance where they have to prove something. So that's gonna be good
Yeah.
because then in the calendar, what's gonna be left? Like Hockenheim, um,
I think
or for
after this
Mercedes.
one is,
No,
well, the next
well,
race
it's the
is
summer break,
Spa.
but
Yeah. It goes into
yeah,
the summer break and then Spa, and then we move on to other tracks. I'm very excited for Zandvoort because
yeah.
that'll be the
Well,
Dutch Grand Prix.
the Orange Army is gonna be there.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one to watch.
Um, there's supposed to be one in America still, so that's
Yeah.
Haas's. home race, but they don't really have any fans. But
Yeah, no, I don't think they really have any US
do you know
fans.
if they're racing in Japan this season?
I'm not sure. Let me check.
Because that would be huge for Honda if they could have this probably one of their best seasons and race in Japan. And yeah,
For some
10th,
reason, I
10th
was
of
on the
October.
BTCC.
Yeah, they plan it at Suzuka 10th of October. So
I love Suzuka. It is such a cool track, and
it's a cool track.
it's one of my favorites on the calendar.
Yeah, Tsunoda is going to be there. Probably that's going to be exciting for him in a Honda engine. Like that guy's going to be a
Yeah,
star. Yeah,
he's big in Japan.
that's going to be really exciting. So I guess a couple more like home Grand Prix, but otherwise we're just going to have some good racing. Um, yeah, they're gonna move towards the summer break after Hungary. Um, do you imagine people are gonna come back from the summer break with big upgrades, or is really everyone shifted to 2022 already?
um, I don't think there will be many big car upgrades. I do think Mercedes is going to upgrade a driver for next season. But no, I kind of think the second half of the season will be a lot of focusing on the 2022 regulations, especially now that we've sort of seen the like Halo car for what they should all look like. Um, yeah, I think they'll move on to that for the second half of the
And
season.
how funny was that like photo op of all of them like in pairs around the car? They all
Just
look like they
standing
did
around
not want to
pointing
be there.
at
It was
it.
so funny. I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah. I mean, probably the only driver that got anything out of that was Inspector Seb.
Of course,
He
of
he
course.
is so good at like analyzing other cars on the grid. So he might be the only one who like already is like, I know exactly how I'm gonna drive this car.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I think it was very much just a Photoshop or photo op and a press gamut.
Man, could they not have found a better livery? Like the reveal 6 months ago, like livery was so much better than that one. That one just made the car look bad.
I know the one
I'm
they
still
used
not over it.
before,
Yeah.
the one they used before was like black and red and cool and all the digital renderings, and then they give it to us with this weird like
Gray with like glitter. I was just like,
it's yeah,
what?
like
Ugh.
it's a chrome car with glitter on it, and I think they kind of wanted to make it look like a jet fuel livery, but it just didn't turn out right at all.
Yeah, it looked off. It looked like when you can like you do your own campaign in like an F1 game and you can do your own livery and you're
Yeah,
just like, okay, I'll do like one of the basics and then I'll
yeah,
put
you
a
haven't
red line.
unlocked the
Yeah,
real
there you go.
liveries yet.
I
Yeah,
feel like,
definitely.
well, that's probably an aspect too of how important sponsorship make a car look, right? Because I feel like any of the livery we have right now with no sponsorship at all would look very weird too.
Yeah, I mean, you would have a just like the Mercedes would look weird, even though I don't think a lot of people like all the AMG stuff on the back. It gives some nice texture to that car. The Red Bulls would just be a like navy blue car.
Yeah, the
Ferraris would
Red
just be
Bulls, like
red.
if you take off like the advertising, like take off the bull, like it'll be just a weird like knockoff like mini, like like those Red Bull minis. It'll be a
With the
knockoff
can on the
that like
back.
livery. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I
Alpine
mean,
would be blue.
yeah. The
Haas,
Alpha Tauris might
yeah,
still look good though.
yeah, they'd be like white, right? Because like what makes all the contrast is like their sponsors are in black, so it'd just be kind of
Yeah.
like a gray car, but could be cool. Um, I mean, I feel like probably Ferrari would be the one that could get away with it the best.
Yeah, because Ferrari used to race with just a red car before like sponsors really came into F1 and like really started to fund it. Yeah, Ferrari just drove around with a red car.
Get me an Aston Martin without the pink stripe, and I'd be so happy.
Whoa.
Oh, bro, did you see that Valkyrie car?
Oh, the Valkyrie. It sounds ridiculous. Man,
bro.
watching the Goodwood Festival of Speed and
Yeah.
hearing it go by, when the one of the cameras followed it, I heard a grown man over the microphones laugh like a 4-year-old kid. He went, "Whoa!" I was like, "Yes, sir."
It was crazy because you can hear to the dip, like when the electric comes in and like the it has like an F1 engine in it. It's like a turbo V6. So it's crazy. Yeah, it sounds crazy. Man, Stroll must have been shitting his pants. Like imagine he crashes that car. Woo-hoo-hoo.
He probably already owns it. His dad owns like 25% of Austin Martin.
No, I agree, but it's still like a one-off.
Still,
Like it's
yeah. Well,
and
also
especially
the Red
there,
Bull
like
drivers have already gotten to drive it as well.
oh, okay. Yeah.
The Red Bull drivers are the ones who like tested it at Silverstone. They've been testing the car like all the way through its development.
Yeah, well, there you go. I just brought up that car because they had the racing green. It just it looks so good. And then you're just like, oh, why do we need cognizance with their fucking and BWT with their pink? Like,
Yeah. Well, Cognizant has like no real corporate color, but the BWT pink just looks so bad. Like make the drivers wear pink helmets, and I don't mind the pink gloves. Like that kind of looks cool from the onboards. I think the pink gloves look cool.
yeah.
But other
BWT,
than
it's
that, I
just
don't want to
man,
see pink on that car.
pink and green. Just it's
They don't
hard to
go
make it work.
together.
Yeah, I don't think they nailed it the first shot. And I think my biggest gripe is the racing uniform. The like the
The
pink like
little pink
shoulder
shoulder
pads.
bits, yeah.
So gross. They look like 7-year-old. Like the used like karting outfit when you go to kart. That's what they look like. They look like something out of ugh.
Definitely. And I think
Bro, you get some like
Austin Martin and
racing green and some
BWT.
silver. Ooh.
Austin
So that
Martin and
AMG
BWT, I
silver.
think, have come out and said like, yeah, we're gonna work on having a more recognizable livery, because also like the British racing green doesn't really stand out on track in the sort of color variation that they have it in right now.
Yeah, that's what I read as well. That Otmar was saying they're working on a new livery just for better differencing on TV. And we brought that up a couple of podcasts ago, so he must have been listening. But yeah, like the Astons and the Mercedes look very similar. So
yeah,
good thing they don't race against each other at any time.
And I mean, this weekend the Austins on the side pods did have a British flag. They did have the Union Jack on there. It just wasn't ever like shown for long enough to actually be noticeable, unfortunately.
They had the racing, they had the medical car and the pace car being the Aston Martins. Oh man, those cars look so dope. The Vanquish and the DBX. Oh, and they were in that racing green. And
yeah,
man, must be so fun to be a pace car in a fucking Aston Martin, just trying to keep up with F1 cars. Like, what
do you think is more fun to drive, the AMG GT or the Aston Martin?
I don't know. I have a bias. Like, I definitely prefer an Aston Martin. I would just say, man, like he feels like fucking James Bond every weekend. Like, it's so dope.
But what about the medical car? Because the medical car is the AMG E-Class wagon.
Yeah.
And it's just the SUV Aston Martin. I think I'd
yeah.
rather drive the wagon.
I agree. The wagon fucking kills. Like, it's dope. And I don't know. The DBX isn't ugly. It's weird. It just feels like they just took an Aston Martin and just kind of like squished it until it popped up and became a like SUV. I'm not a fan. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's a cool like SUV, and I saw one in person when I went to play golf, and like it's a really cool car. And the guy was telling us like he loves it. Like it's like driving a sports car, but it's an SUV, and so like that's pretty dope. But yeah, it looks weird. And
I mean that's like, kind of any of like the sports car SUVs. Like the Porsche Panamera looks like the Cayenne looks like they stretched a Porsche and then pulled it up as high as they could.
Yeah, it's same with the
Lamborghini.
Yeah. But I think you know what? Like we saw it with Lamborghini and we saw it with the Porsches. SUV sales. Like I think if they are able to market it well, they're gonna make a lot of fucking money. Like, and they just came out of like some tough like money problems, so that's probably why it exists.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the Aston Martin SUV and the Jaguar SUV, they look very similar.
Is that what is that? Is that the E-Pace? What is it called?
The F Pace. It is a good looking SUV. I quite like the way the F
No,
Pace
I
looks.
prefer the Jaguar. That's a good looking SUV.
Yeah. Well, because I
Yeah,
feel like you're also more used to seeing like four-door Jaguars than you are to seeing four-door Aston Martins.
yeah, that's a good point. No, that's like a perfectly proportioned like SUV. You know what though? It looks very similar to a lot of other SUVs, which the Aston doesn't. It has such a
Yeah.
like it has
It does
such
have
a
a very Aston Martin look.
yeah, it has such an Aston Martin look that it's very different. So when you have the money to pay like $150,000 for an SUV, you probably want something a bit different. So yeah.
Then get the Lamborghini.
Nah, I would
The
never get. I would
Lamborghini
definitely get the
machine.
Aston before a Lambo any day.
One of them drove past my house. The downshift on the Urus is, oh, it's
Oh
very
yeah.
nice.
Does it crack? Does it pop and crackle?
It has a snap, crackle, and a pop like
Oh yeah.
nobody's
Oh
business.
yeah. Man, yeah. I think that's probably one of the best marketing moves like that fucking that Stroll Senior did. Bringing those Aston Martin as like pace cars and stuff, like genius. Like
Yeah.
kick off AMG to be like, okay, we'll split and get some Aston Martin there. That's like really smart. And I was looking at Aston's website, and now they're selling like a Vanquish, like special F1 edition and stuff, and it has like F1 badges, and it looks dope. It's the green, and like, yeah, it looks really dope.
That's, I mean, big marketing moves from Daddy Stroll, you know?
And wouldn't expect anything else. But you know what? That's like something that it made me think of. It's like, how is like Stroll Senior, a guy who like made all of his money selling like fancy clothes, right? And like luxury clothes. That's how he made his fortune. How the fuck did the racing suit pass the test? I'm still not over it. It looks so bad.
I hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned it. I mean, that's just big corporate dollars coming into land or to Lawrence. Like,
Yeah,
at that,
BWT paid for that pink, but like,
yeah.
damn.
I mean, they're paying for it in more ways than one. It looks awful.
Bro, like, come on, Stroll, like, get Ralph Lauren or whoever else you worked with to design something hype beast, and like you'll get so many fans.
Yeah.
Get some hype beast like off-white hat, like whew. I'm sure they would sell well too.
And Versace racing suits.
Bro, Versace.
Those would probably go to Ferraris first.
Man. I find it very. How much influence does Ferrari have on Alfa Romeo? Do you know if they help them at all?
They share engine, and I think the Alphas use previous year spec Ferrari parts, and Ferrari also gets a contracted seat with them. Same with
Yeah.
Haas.
Okay, so they can put their like academy drivers.
Yeah,
Because
which is why I was kind of surprised Schumacher didn't go to Alpha, because that's also the team he did all of his sort of I'm gonna join F1 next season testing with.
I think it's because you can't kick off Kimi, and Gio is Italian, and that's important for an Italian team, right?
But what's more important for Ferrari, having a Schumacher properly in the Italian team family or having an Italian?
I don't know.
If I think of Ferrari in Formula 1, I think Schumacher.
Yeah.
That was the only thing for me. Man, I can't wait to see Leclerc and baby Schumi be on a team together. It'll happen. It'll happen one day.
What is it? Yeah, because I feel like that's probably one of the craziest thing we're seeing this like season is the difference between AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo. Right? If we take them as both teams being like B teams or support teams from their mother teams, like
Mm-hmm.
man, it's a pretty crazy difference.
Yeah. I think
Like
that also goes to
Alpha
look
Alpha
look
Romeo has scored 2 points so far this season. Two, like that's pretty crazy.
look at the Alfa Romeo's parent team to Alpha Tauri's parent team. There's a pretty big gap there too.
Yeah,
So
that's the right answer. The engine's not equivalent.
mhm.
All right. I'm excited for the next race. Kind of a shame we don't have a double header right now, but I think we're gonna get a lot of action when we get back from that summer break. So I guess we'll see if we have an episode next week. I imagine if we find something interesting, we will. Otherwise, we'll see you after the next race weekend. All right. Anything else you want to add? Should we try to
Just to touch on sort of what happened at last year's Hungarian Grand Prix, the top three was a ever so classic and what we know so well from 2020, a Hamverbot. But
no, never again.
We got to see Stroll and Vettel both put up good performances. So Stroll finished fourth in that Grand Prix.
Really?
Yeah, and I think Vettel
Who crashed out? Was there some DNS?
Not that I saw. When I looked through, I didn't see any obvious DNFs.
I'm gonna go look.
We also have to remember that Alex Albon was Verstappen's teammate that season, so there wasn't a whole lot of support for that Red Bull. Albon, I think, finished like 8th. I think Vettel was 6th or 7th.
Okay, so Gasly was the only DNF that time. That's crazy, bro. I'm hyped. Let's go, Stroll. Well, you got to remember too. This was at the start of the season when Racing Point seemed to have like a
pink
crazy
Mercedes
car. Like they had a package.
They did.
Right? Oh my god, I remember that. They literally had the 2019 Mercedes car, and it was better than the 2020 cars that most other people had made.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because look at the qualifying. Lewis Hamilton, Bottas, 1 and 2. Stroll, Perez, 3 and 4. With Racing Point.
Man, oh man.
That's crazy. Bro. That's very funny. And then that's all the drama of people saying they just stole the car and then they got some penalties, got some points taken away from them. Damn.
Hopefully we can see the Aston Martins do a repeat of what Racing Point did last year. That would be very impressive and would make me very happy as a Seb Vettel fan. Even just as an Aston Martin fan and a Canadian, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm such a like Aston Martin fan right now just because there's dope cars, and I'm a Canadian and I support Stroll. Poor Latifi, we always
it's way easier to support Stroll than Latifi. Well, he's getting like out qualified by like 10 positions to his teammate. It's kind of hard to support a driver when you're getting made to look silly driving that car.
Yeah, at least, we got to be grateful that he doesn't have any major controversy. He's a nice guy. He's always very he always has he always talks well. Yeah, that's it. At least he looks like a good guy.
Yeah, definitely.
He's not a fucking Mazepin.
So yeah, I was just about to say.
You gotta celebrate those things. Man, I look at the 20 constructor standings at the end of the year, and it's so crazy. McLaren was third. Okay. Racing Point fourth. That's exciting. Man, between McLaren and Racing Point was only 7 points at the end of the season. 7 points.
Tight.
And then Ferrari finished sixth.
Racing Point probably could have been third if they didn't get their points docked for taking.
Yeah, I think so. I think they would have. They would definitely have. Like McLaren got very lucky.
Yeah,
but then remember, right? The last two races, like Checo had a hell of a race with Racing Point. They went and got points there, and yeah. It's like it's one or two. It's one DNF away from winning third place, which is crazy.
Yeah. Those
F1,
are
man.
tight margins.
Man, how much of a difference is it going to make, like constructor standings, you think, next year with the salary cap, right? Is everybody capped at the same thing? Because that was like the biggest thing, was that if you'd finish higher, you'd have more money to spend and get better,
Yeah,
right?
so
Which was such a
everybody
big
gets the
difference for
same amount of
midfield.
money now.
So who cares, right? I guess you still make more money if you finish first, right? It'd go for the investor or whatever. So that's the reward.
Yeah, I think it gets put into like the actual like team facilities and not into what you can do on the car. Like your money to spend on the car is capped, but
Yeah. Okay.
you can still kind of spend to the moon on drivers and engineers and all that stuff, I'm pretty
Is there
sure.
not I thought there was a salary cap on drivers. No, you're right. There's definitely not that yet.
Well, because driver salaries have never been disclosed. So like
Oh,
because they also bring in sponsors, they're getting money from the
oh,
sponsors, the
that's a big
teams.
point.
Like
Yeah. Okay.
it's so hard to actually figure out what a team is paying a driver.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. Whatever, right? Like
As long as
driver.
the cars can all be more equal and you don't have, a like 100 $200 million difference between first and last in their spending ability, then
Yeah.
that's all we can really ask for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Mercedes, who've been swimming in so much money for so long, like
Honestly, yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna hurt them too much, but yeah, that's exciting to see. I'm very excited to see what we can get next year with the new regulations. And nothing, like, one thing is gonna, the only way we're gonna know is next year when they start racing. So I
Exactly.
think that wraps it well. I had a great conversation. I like the little deviation towards pace cars because go Aston Martin. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed this, let us know. Other than
Hope you
that,
enjoyed the chit chat.
yeah, other than that, Simon, my co-host Wills, and I are very happy to do this week on and sometimes week off, but most of the time every week. And so, yeah, thank you, and talk to you guys next time.
Like, comment, subscribe.